Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our fifth episode of Sports Zone on our not so new virtual platform. I think we've got the hang of it so far, and tonight we'll be discussing The Last Dance, the documentary about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's great. I have with me two of my beloved analysts, Garrett Stringfellow and Christian Ericheta. I hope you guys are doing great during all this quarantine. The first thing I'll ask you, Garrett, is what do you think about it? Like, there are some mixed reviews on it. I think it's amazing. As an overview of the whole entire doc so far, we're about four episodes in. What are you thinking?
I've loved it so far. As somebody who grew up, obviously, I wasn't super into basketball. I got into basketball with Kobe Bryant around 2005, 2006. Watched that Mavericks versus Heat finals, and that's kind of what got me hooked. So I grew up kind of always just thinking that like Kobe Bryant was like the best player. He's the best player I'd ever seen. And to this day, I think he's still the best player that I have ever seen. But I haven't been judging it too harshly or too critically. I've just been sitting back and enjoying watching Jordan, watching a lot of these stories that I've heard told, but I've never seen. I haven't even gotten a chance to see a lot of Michael Jordan play. So just to see like a lot of game footage from him, even though that's not the focus of the documentary, I've really enjoyed the documentary side of as far as documenting what happened off the court, but I've also enjoyed the on the court stuff as well. I feel like it's been a good mix. Now, for people who have seen a lot of Michael Jordan on the court, maybe that footage is redundant to them. Maybe they don't care to watch him anymore. But as somebody who hasn't seen it, it's really refreshing to watch him because he's, you know, just hearing people talk about him, you would never realize how good he was. Like truly finishing around the basket, just an absolute, you know, virtuoso. Just as far as going up in the air, changing direction, changing his shot in midair. Obviously, didn't have the 3-point shot back then, but still, just an incredible, incredible scorer. And I've loved it so far. 4 episodes in, I tune in every Sunday, and next Sunday I'll be tuning in as well.
All right, Christian, what do
I
you think
I've
of this whole entire doc? Garrett really got into depth about Michael Jordan. Did you grow up like watching old footage of Michael Jordan? What do you think of this doc?
to me,
Yes.
yeah. So I've really enjoyed it as well. I got into sports probably 2015, a little bit after high school, and I kind of wanted to look up the best that ever played. And you've always heard Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and then Michael Jordan. And so I doing the research and hearing about some of these controversies that they had with the Dream Team and especially the Bad Boys and the Detroit Pistons. I really wanted to go in depth and see how they really felt about these guys, and the fact that Michael and some of the Bulls still have some tension. It truly means like it means a lot to this day about how much they hated each other. I mean, I don't know if there's a reason that type of game isn't allowed in this today, but I really like looking back and just seeing how the game's evolved. You hear these people saying like Michael Jordan's the best ever played, and people say the game isn't like it used to be, and you're seeing it now. You're seeing it now with um, this documentary coming out, and I'm excited to see, especially next week when they talk about the Dream Team, probably the best team to ever be assembled. And I want to see the discussions and see why Isaiah Thomas wasn't on that team. But they had the Detroit Pistons coach on that as the coach. It's been nice. It's been great. It's been great to see these players' mentalities and see how the game's changed from back then to where it is now. I've loved it, and I'm glad there's 3 more weekends of this.
No, I definitely agree with you. I have done nothing but enjoy it. I was really upset whenever I was caught up and I was like, "Oh, I gotta wait until Sunday to watch another episode." And I do agree with you, Gary. It's kind of like I didn't grow up watching it play. None of us did, we're kind of youngsters over here. And I think it's really interesting to kind of go in depth and kind of get that, from their side, from Michael's side, what he was going through with management and other teams and guys on his team, and this personal struggle that he had to, go from a rookie that came in that immediately manded that role to someone that actually played it out and taking them to a championship. And then he got placed into those categories with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. And, he paved that way for so many other players like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. And one thing that I think that I'll ask you next is that I have said I'm an old soul. My parents taught me, Michael Jordan is the best player to ever play the game. But like Christian said, the game is evolving. So, like Garrett, you think that Kobe Bryant was the best to play the game. Well, people in our generation are saying it's LeBron James. And that's kind of the argument that I've been having with people. It's like at that time, every generation is going to have their player that is the best because the game is always evolving. So, Garrett, do you think that when we have children, they will see a new player and be like, that's the best player to ever play the game?
Absolutely. I think there is I think it's tough because it's fun to sit around and debate, an old player in a new generation or who was, the best or the most dominant. Um, Ultimately, I think it's good to take a step back and just respect greatness as far as like everybody that we've seen, with Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, as far as just like accepting these players as extremely great, at the top of their craft. Um, but I do think that is what creates a lot of the debates, is because these players do play in different generations. The rules have changed. Of course, with like the hand checking, that was a huge thing. 3-pointers have become a huge staple in today's game. So a lot of, people in today, like, I think that Stephen Curry is the greatest shooter of all time, but it's just because he has grown up in a generation that emphasizes shooting. So of course, that's a lot of what he's going to work on. Um, but that's not necessarily to say that, a player from the past could not have been as good as Stephen Curry if it had been a staple in the game at that point. So I think as generations change, as as what, is emphasized in the sport, as what succeeds in the sport of basketball changes, um, I do think every generation is going to have a different player that they think is the greatest. Um, because a lot of people will criticize Michael Jordan for, he couldn't shoot the three ball. But that just wasn't important in, the game back then. It wasn't nearly as important as it is now. So the game changes, and, generationally different players will be at the top of their game. And I think it's important to just take a step back and say, okay, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, these guys were at the top during their time. Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Dirk, those were the top of the, food chain at their time. And now we've got guys like LeBron, Giannis, Steph Curry, that are at the top right now. And I think it's great for the sport, and it sucks that we haven't seen basketball in a hot minute. But I think this documentary has been good to really look back on Michael Jordan and appreciate his greatness without, thinking about is LeBron better or, anything like that.
All right, I just want to say that if you're playing NBA 2K and you're not playing as the 96, 97 Bulls, you're doing something wrong. All right, Christian, I'll ask you this now about our number 2 man, Scottie Pippen. He's kind of like, he's made out to be this amazing number 2 player to Michael Jordan, which they were. They were like two peas in a pod. They're right there. They're synchronized with each other. But when it came down to brass tacks with Scottie Pippen, he wasn't getting the reimbursement that he wanted, that he thought that he deserved. So I just want to hear your opinion, Christian, on how management kind of treated this great player on the Bulls.
I mean, the documentary talks about it pretty well, especially with Jerry Krause. His ideal of like people kind of thought that he wanted to have the name of putting the Bulls together, and so I think a lot of this comes down to him and his decision. But with Scottie, he signed that deal, I think it was 7 years, 14 million or 15 million in 1990, and so I mean, I think he was like 32. I can't remember how old he was going into the 97, 98 season. But I mean, I understand where he's coming from. He wants to get paid. I mean, he's arguably the number 2 player in the NBA. His teammate Jordan being the number 1. And I mean, they've said it without Pimpin. You had Robin, but you needed Pimpin to win that championship. I think you needed Pimpin to win all the championships. And so I understand his point. He wanted to get paid. He wanted to get paid, and I'm completely fine with that. I really wish Jerry Krause would have given him an extension so that they could have kept that together. But I think Jerry Krause is way of saying I'm at the end of the day, I'm the one that controls this team. I think that was his way of getting back at Michael and the Bulls for kind of not giving him the I get the credit that he thinks he deserves, and he deserves a lot of credit. I mean, he did a lot of things for that team, but like Michael said in the documentary, that at the end of the day, I mean, the players matter a little bit more than the front office when it comes to the results on the court, and I mean, it does. I mean, you need a good coach, you need good players. Front office can put them together, but the front office needs to know that sometimes, like, just give it a while. And Jerry Krause didn't. He wanted it right away. He wanted the he wanted the congratulations right away. He didn't wait until when it finished naturally. So I'm with Scotty. I wish he got paid, and I mean, I understand why he took the deal to begin with, but I wish they gave him an extension so they could have extended him and kept the team together longer.
No, you're most certainly right. It definitely showed, especially going into that 98 season where they didn't have Scottie Pippen and he had kind of, put aside his rehab on purpose. So, Garrett, do you think that that was justified, that Scottie Pippen was sending a message to Jerry Krause and to management that it was kind of like a hand in their face, like, I'm here and I'm the number 2 player, I'm not getting the reimbursement that I need, that I feel that I deserve? Do you think that that was justified?
I don't necessarily know if it was justified for him to put off his rehab until during the season, but I mean, you got to look at Scottie Pippen's position. He was in a bad spot as far as the deal that he took, 7 years for 15 or 16 million or whatever it was. Obviously, at the time, there wasn't a huge precedent set as far as like salaries go, and his situation growing up, not having financial security. So he so badly wanted that financial security, and he wanted to obviously protect, in case he has injuries or stuff like that. So signing a long-term contract is smart. It makes me feel like the Bulls administration took advantage of him a little bit, because I feel like they had a better idea of the player that he was going to become than he really even did. So they threw out a long-term deal with, low money. They say this is financial security. No matter what, you get hurt, you regress. We've got you. Even though they understood that he was going to be one of the better players, in that generation at the time. And then even, as he would go on to be, get better and better and be Michael Jordan's number 2 man on these championship teams, they still wouldn't, reevaluate his contract. So I have no problem with him asking for a trade and not wanting to play for the team then. But it does feel a little bit selfish to, wait on his rehab. And of course, that's not going to affect his administration as much. That's going to affect his teammates, the coach. That's going to affect everyone else on the team. So it's tough. If I was in Scottie Pippen's position, would I do it? I don't know, maybe. The man just wanted to enjoy his enjoy his summer, so it's hard to blame him after what they did to him for sure. And it's crazy to think that he was the 132nd highest paid player in the league. If you extrapolate that out to today, that player is Andre Roberson, and it's just to even put Scottie Pippen and Andre Roberson in the same conversation seems absurd.
All right. Well, I definitely agree with you. I don't think it's justified. I think he had every right to be upset, especially with them, like you said, not reevaluating his contract after he had been so successful with Jordan. And you can debate that if he didn't have Jordan there, he would not have been as successful because he didn't have that other player pushing him. So let's move on to the Detroit Pistons and this 2 year, 3 year long vendetta between the Pistons and the Bulls. The Bulls kept on going up against them. They kept on taking them down, but they took them down in a very aggressive way that was kind of new to the NBA at that time. So, Garrett, I want to know, what do you think made the Pistons so strong?
Just pure physicality. I mean, the Pistons were willing to hit you, and it was just one of those things where if a guy's going in for a layup, they say if you're gonna foul him, you need to foul him hard, so he doesn't want to come back into the paint. It's pure intimidation, and you don't see that in today's game at all. And there's a part of morality to it, almost like the spirit of the game. And to them, that was part of the game, and that was, just how it could be played. Intimidation and physicality was very much a part of the game back then, but obviously people's mentalities have changed. Um, and that's not to say the Pistons didn't have great players. I mean, Bill Laimbeer was a great player. Isaiah Thomas was an incredible player, had an incredible handle, could score from basically anywhere. But yeah, it's just pure physicality was their key to success.
All right, Christian. So Garrett mentioned their pure physicality, the way that they're aggressive on the court. Do you think that the Pistons would have even been a threat like today if they had all the rules that we have today? Do you think that their team would have been as successful as they was going on to win Eastern Conference champs and NBA Finals championships?
Have to so like the Pistons, the exact same roster from their I like, but they can't be as physical. Do they
Yeah.
still have Chuck Daly, the head coach? Yeah, absolutely. I still think they could, if they still have their coach, absolutely. I think I mean, not winning championships, but being a threat in the East. Yeah, yeah. Because I think, I mean, Isaiah, I think just because they knew the one thing that they did is they adjusted for I mean, they adjusted for Mike, but yeah. I mean, I have to look at I don't know the roster on the tip of my tongue, but with Dennis Rodman, I mean, Dennis Rodman easily is one of the top defenders to ever play the game. Rebounders. I mean, that was all he knew was basketball. I mean, and with Isaiah Thomas and just the true grit, I would, I think they would still be pretty successful. I think if they had the exact same coach and roster, I think they could be either a top 2 or 3 team in the East today. And that's, I mean, yeah, even without the physicality.
And do you think that the way they played using the physicality, do you think that that was sportsmanlike in basketball?
Oh no, I mean they were the bad boys for the reason. I mean they knew the game, they knew the name, they knew the rules to the game, so they exploited them, and they were physical. I mean, they would have to adjust to today's game, but um, they, yeah, they were just it was a physical beating, and I thought that was they were the bad boys for the reason. Maybe it wasn't. I mean, there was a reason. I think in the NIST documentary of the Bad Boys, most teams didn't like the Detroit Pistons because like they played the game differently because they were physical. I mean, uh, it was a physical game back then, but they took it up a level when they played Michael. I mean, you're lucky Michael didn't get hurt and like a serious injury in those games because if they did, I don't know if they would have cared as much. So yeah,
Yeah, it kind of fueled the fire for the Bulls and whenever they went on and beat them. So let's talk a little bit. We mentioned Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman, I agree with you, Christian, will be one of the best players to ever, one of the best defensive players to ever play the game. They talk about in the doc in his interview today how he would study and how he would have his friends shoot the ball so that he can see the rotation of ball and defend it correctly. So Garrett, do you think that Dennis Rodman coming from the Pistons and then having to kind of morph into the game that Michael wanted him to play, do you think that the Bulls would have been as successful without the defense threat of Dennis Rodman?
Absolutely not. I mean, Dennis Rodman was, I mean, I would almost say as crucial of that team as Scottie Pippen was. I mean, just as far as defensive and rebounding, and not only defensive and rebounding, which people give Dennis Rodman a lot of credit for, and is well deserved, but offensively, Dennis Rodman just understood the game. And Dennis Rodman said in the documentary when they were interviewing him, when they were actually filming it, he was like, he made the point of like basketball. He's like, basketball is easy. He's like, the offense we run, the defense we run. He's like, I understand the ins and outs of the game. He's like, but everything outside of basketball, he's like, that's what's, really difficult to me is like understanding how to navigate like the fame and the money that comes along with it and the pressure that comes along with it and a lot of those things. So those were more of the challenges for Dennis Rodman. But you know, he just understood the game of basketball and his work ethic. People will challenge his work ethic because of like the trip to Vegas and a lot of the off the court antics and stuff like that. But everybody's different, and everybody needs to release a different way. Um, and with Dennis Rodman, the thing that I've always thought is, he plays hard, but he works hard as well. There's a lot of guys who will never match his work ethic, and it's like, was Dennis Rodman always in the gym? Was he always working on his game? No, but when he was in the gym and when he was putting in time, he took it seriously. Um, and it's just great. Like, who else do you know that has practiced purely rebounding, spending hours in the gym just rebounding? It's insane. Nobody in today's game is spending hours in the gym just practicing how to rebound the basketball. It's absurd to even think about. But yeah, his work ethic and his, the impact on the court defensively and offensively, just understanding how to run that offense, where he fits in. Because that's important too when you have a big star player like Michael Jordan or a guy like that. Everybody else in the offense needs to learn how to fit and adjust to him, and they have to accept their role and not want to do too much. And it's the same thing with Michael Jordan, needed to learn how to pass the ball and trust his teammates. So yeah, absolutely. Dennis Rodman was a huge part of that team. I don't know how successful they are without him, but certainly I don't think all 6 championships.
So Garrett mentioned that Dennis Rodman, that the whole team had to kind of know their role behind Michael, and Michael had to learn how to pass the ball to his teammates, trust his teammates. But when Scottie Pippen was hurt, he really took Dennis Rodman underneath his wing and is like, "Hey, I need you to have me, and I'll have you." So Christian, do you think that kind of changed the way that Dennis Rodman kind of viewed the game and kind of took it more serious now that he had Michael Jordan kind of taking him underneath his wing?
Um, I mean, I think he always took the game serious. I think he, man, that's a big question. Um, can you repeat the question again one more time? It was a lot.
So like Dennis Rodman came in and he had to kind of step into the role of Scottie Pippen when Scottie Pippen was hurt. So do you think that he kind of like, was, a great defensive player kind of in the back of the scenes over there, but then he got pulled underneath Michael Jordan's wing? Do you think that made him more of a teammate, of a better teammate, because Michael Jordan was there for him?
Yeah, yeah, because I think beforehand it was always the Detroit Pistons. Like when he was with the Detroit, it was kind of just the bad boys, and so he didn't really need to be. He didn't. There was like he was just there. He knew his role. But whenever it came to he needed to step up to be Michael's number 2, he was like, oh my gosh, I'm Michael's number 2. It was always Scottie. Now I'm Michael's number 2. He's like he understood the pressure and he understood what it was. He's like, okay, I need to be his number 2, and he felt like I guess he felt that he had another meaning. I mean, we could if you haven't check out Dennis Rodman's past and where he came from. I mean, it's crazy how he got to where he is now. And so I think he finally found somebody that was like needing him, and he was like, I'm not gonna let this guy down. And so I think that's when he finally embodied. He's like, yes, I can do this. Like, I'll be your number 2. Sorry, I mean, he was going through a lot of stuff, but he understood that when it came to basketball, I can do this. And then he took care of everything else off the court. But I think it solidified him as a teammate for that last season, because he's like, you know what, I am Michael's number 2 right now, and that's fine. And the fact that he was, I guess it'll get more into that in the next episode, and it touched a little bit now, but to kind of see that transition from going from Michael's number 2 to again being the Bulls number 3 again whenever Scottie returned. The fact they were able to hold that together, and I guess egos didn't get in the way. It was a good. I mean, hence why he went to Vegas. But it was a good. It was a. I'm glad they were able to hold it together. I mean, looking at this documentary now, I'm surprised they won that last championship for the amount of things that just went along. They had so much talent, and it's crazy. I don't know if that could happen today with all that.
All right. So we mentioned that Michael Jordan's obviously at the center of this all, at the center of Scottie Pippen, of Phil Jackson, the coach, and of Dennis Rodman. So let's talk a little bit about his work ethic and, and how he played the game, how he viewed the game. His upbringing was you play to win. And that's what he carried into the NBA. That's what he carried into the Bulls. And that's why he won so many championships in my eyes. But some people are watching this documentary and they're kind of seeing him as cutthroat, which I can't negate that either because the dude, he wanted perfection. That's what he commanded from his teammates and said, like, there are no mistakes. So, Garrett, do you think that this documentary kind of paints Michael in this light of being a little bit harsh, that he demands, will not take no for an answer?
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily paints him in that light or if he paints himself in that light. But I mean, you do see sort of the deeper insight into the work ethic of Michael Jordan. He was a guy that was the first guy into the gym. He was a guy that would yell and scream at you in practice if you messed up. He was a guy that would humiliate you if you were not putting in the same type of work as he did, which was almost impossible because Michael Jordan was, just a freak as far as work ethic is concerned. But no, I don't necessarily think it's painting him in a negative light. With a lot of the athletes you see that are watching it and reacting to it on Twitter and things like that, um, a lot of them are, in support, almost wishing that they had that work ethic or being like, I'm inspired by watching this type of thing. Um, but no, I don't think it paints him in a negative light. I'll be excited to see if, well, I've been really curious to see if they're going to go into his break from basketball to play baseball, that year and a half or whatever it was, because it's not very often that, a player at the top of their craft, retires in the smack dab middle of their prime after, three-peating to go play baseball. I've always wondered, is there something more into that? And if there is, I'm sure that we won't see it. If the secret is a
Yeah.
little bit more sinister, people have hypothesized that it was a secret suspension. That obviously Michael Jordan has had trouble with gambling and things like that. So I was really curious to see if this documentary would address it. Hasn't done so far, but we're only 2/5 of the way through it. So um, I don't know. I'm excited to see that, but no, I don't think it paints Jordan in a bad light really at all.
All right. Well, personally, I'm waiting on Space Jam. I want them to show some Space Jam footage because I'm like, this is about the time that Space Jam's going on. So, Christian, I'll kind of ask you the same question. Michael Jordan, he's even in his interviews right now, like they're not really taking his interview and morphing it, and he's saying all the same things that he said way back then. He doesn't have any regrets. So do you think this is painting him in a bad light, or like Garrett said, he's painting himself in a bad light?
No, I mean, I think he was just a born competitor, and he took a challenge. He said, "I want to be the best," and he achieved it. He's probably had his own struggles, but he really has. He's made himself, like, the public's perception is he crafted that. Like, it's very he's made that into he's what he's made that of himself. I think it I think the thing that really started that was going through the 90s and, like, just kind of saying, I'm going, like, just going through and winning all these championships. And it really helped that I think all his teammates were there when they're losing to the Detroit Pistons. And so whenever he got the mentality of, you're going to work hard so we don't lose, I think everyone was on board because everyone was losing to the Detroit Pistons. And they're like, we got to do this. It wasn't like you're adding somebody new that they were like, we can't play like that. I mean, they already had that adjustment when they added what's the coach's name? Phil Jackson. Um, but the fact that he was able to change his game in order to win, I think showed a lot. Because he could have just been like, no, I'm not playing like that. I'm going to play my ball, and everyone else has to get open. The fact that he was able to adapt and take on the role of saying, you know what, you're right, I will listen to you. I think that also describes of a person he is, that he's able to adjust, and if it involves winning, he just wanted to win. I don't think he cared about the spotlight that much. The spotlight came to him because he was so good. But I think at the end of the day, as long as he won, it didn't matter. And I think the fact that he adjusted to Phil Jackson, um, triangle offense helped a lot, proving that statement. So, but
All right. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is Phil Jackson and this whole beef that he has with Jerry Krause. And I think it's a little interesting because, as the doc tells us, that Jerry Krause brought Phil in from he went from a Puerto Rican league to another league, and then he went to the Bulls. And Jerry Krause kind of brought him in and bringing him under his wing. He loved this guy to, you have 98 roll around, and after 5 consecutive championships, he's like, I don't care whether you win or lose, you're out. So I just want to know, Garrett, do you think that why do you think that? Why do you think that Phil Jackson, after all this success that he was having, that Jerry Krause wanted him out so bad?
I don't know. It's interesting because I don't know. The way they describe it in the documentary is that, Jerry Krause had a little bit of what is often called short little man syndrome or short man syndrome or whatever. Um, and I don't know. I don't think it's as simple as that. But it had to be hard for him to build this team. They drafted Michael Jordan. They built this team around him. They brought in Phil Jackson, and have had like the mountains and mountains of success. And the name you heard least often was Jerry Krause. I feel like at a certain point, like he had to feel like, man, I'm this mastermind who has built this like empire, this incredible basketball team. We've three-peated. We have 2 championships, and then it's in the they're about to go to 98. You know, I just think it had to have been tough on him to be like, man, I built this entire thing, but no one is giving me credit for it. You know, everybody's putting, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player ever. Phil Jackson is one of the greatest coaches of all time. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen are the best 1-2 duo in NBA history. But nobody mentions, how Krause built that team or anything like that. So I can imagine it's hard to not be in the spotlight. Um, but at the same time, it doesn't justify his actions in any way of trying to send Phil Jackson out the door, or not caring about Scottie Pippen and renegotiating his contract and saying, well, if Jordan wants to leave with Phil Jackson, or he wants to retire, then he might as well. Like I just think that showed an entire new level of disrespect for the thing that he had built, and the people that were part of his organization, that he's like, well, I'm sorry, Phil, regardless of the mountains and mountains of success that we've had with you, next year comes, you're out the door. And Michael said, well, I'm going to be out the door too. And even then, he doesn't even reconsider it. So I don't know. It doesn't justify what he did at all. And I truly think it was just an act of jealousy, and just, having all this success and not getting any credit for it. I mean, it must have been hard, but it doesn't justify what he did at all.
All right, Christian, I'll ask you the same thing. Jerry Krause and Phil Jackson kind of got this vendetta, going into the 98 season. He said, you're out, like Garrett said. Do you think that's justified? Why do you think he's kicking Phil Jackson out at this time?
I mean, I have to agree with Garrett on that. I think he wanted some credit. Usually, I understand trying to get rid of older players because they might be hitting their point in performance, but with coaches, I mean, if it's working, you got to let them go. I mean, you got to let them just continue what they're doing. I mean, Jerry saw this guy that he wanted to hire in to replace it, to like to restart the Bulls franchise, and I think he really just he did that. He did that because he wanted to break up the Bulls. I mean, I don't know why else you would do that. I understand people getting old for players, but for coaches, I mean, you don't do that. I mean, you only do that if either the coach is declining in performance, or the coach has done something awful, and I don't think he did either of those. I mean, I think Jerry Krause just wanted his a new guy in there. He brought in Phil Jackson, and Phil Jackson did really well. But then I think Phil Jackson went more for Michael and Scotty instead of Jerry. And Jerry was like, no, 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 you're my guy. I need my guy back. You're with them, so I don't need you anymore. I want another guy that's going to be with me. And I think Jerry wanted the power. I mean, he did great by finding Scottie Pippen, and putting an organization together. But I mean, he was his own worst kryptonite when it came to just, I guess, really hurting the Chicago Bulls. I mean, he hurting the ending of the Chicago Bulls. So yeah, it was his his own personal pride got in the way.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This concludes our fifth episode of Sports Zone. I hope you guys keep on watching it. I definitely will. I love it, and I have nothing but great things to say about it. So, all of you watching at home, stay home and stay healthy.